Welcome to this e-module. This program is designed for the students of Bachelor of Science 3rd year in the subject of Botany, Semester 6, course code BOC 108, and the title of this course is Cytogenetics and Plant Breeding. The title of this unit is Mendelian Genetics and its extension. Module name, Principles of Inheritance, Mendel's Law. I am Emma Fernandez, Assistant Professor in the MP College of Arts and Science. In this module, we are going to learn about genetic terminologies, law of dominance, law of segregation or law of purity of gametes, and law of independent assortment. At the end of this e-module, student will define genetic terms used to understand Mendel's laws, state Mendel's laws of inheritance, explain Mendel's laws of inheritance, and recall the law of dominance, law of segregation, and law of independent assortment. Mendel crossed different varieties of pea plants in which his intention was to find the relationship between the hybridization and the history of evolution of organic forms. He discovered the basic laws of heredity. They are law of dominance, law of segregation, or it is also called as law of purity of gametes, and law of independent assortment. Before we learn about various laws of Mendel's, we shall learn about some genetic terminologies which will help us in understanding the laws in a better way. First, we have gene locus. Gene locus is the specific position of a gene on a chromosome. Here you can see a chromosome on which the locus is labeled in blue color. So this is the gene locus. Allele. An allele is a variant form of a gene. Some genes have a variety of different forms which are located at the same position or genetic locus on a chromosome. Here we have 3 chromosomes and each of these chromosomes have alleles marked which are different forms of a same gene which are marked in blue, orange and green in color. A monohybrid cross is a cross between two parents differing in only one pair of alternating characters. For example, purple colored flower is crossed with a white colored flower. A dihybrid cross is a cross between two parents differing in two pairs of contrasting characters. For example, the height of the plant, which is tall, and the color of the flower, which is purple, crossed with the height of the plant, which is short, and the color of the flower, which is white. A phenotype is any measurable characteristic or distinctive trait possessed by an organism. For example, the color of a flower. It can be either purple or white in pea plants. Also, we can take the example of texture of hair. A genotype is the genetic constitution of an individual. A homologous individual is an individual with identical alleles at both gene loci for a particular phenotypic trait. A heterozygous individual is an individual with different alleles for a particular phenotypic trait on both gene loci. Now we are in a better position to learn about various laws of Mendel. First, we shall see the law of dominance. It states that when parents with pure contrasting traits are crossed together, only one form of trait appears in the next generation. Further, the hybrid offsprings will exhibit only the dominant trait in the phenotype. Let us understand this law with the help of a monohybrid cross. A cross is carried out between the tall plant, which is represented as capital T, with a short plant, which is represented as small t. After undergoing cross pollination, the F1 generation produced all tall plants. So, the law of dominance explains that in a monohybrid cross between a pair of contrasting traits, only one parental character will be expressed in the F1 generation. The parental character which is expressed is called as the dominant trait, and the parental character which is suppressed is called as the recessive trait. In simple words, the law of dominance states that recessive traits are always dominated or masked by the dominant trait. Now let us learn about the second law, that is law of segregation, or which is also called as law of purity of gametes. It states that in a heterozygote, a dominant and a recessive allele remain together throughout the life without contaminating or mixing with each other, and finally separate or segregate from each other during gametogenesis, so that each gamete receives only one allele, either dominant or recessive. Let us consider the example of monohybrid cross again. So when we crossed two individuals in the F1 generation, we got all tall plants. Later on, the offsprings of the F1 generation were self together, and in F2 generation, what they found was mixture of plants, that is tall plants as well as short plants, in the ratio 3:1. It means that tall and dwarf alleles though remain together for a long time, but they do not contaminate or mix with one another. Both alleles segregate to produce gametes which either have dominant allele or recessive allele. Since in F2 generation, recessive types reappeared, it was apparent to Mendel that hereditary constitution of an individual was not necessarily revealed by its external appearance. And so, Mendel concluded that gametes from each parent carried something which was responsible for the appearance of a particular character. When the segregation takes place in F1 hybrids, two types of gametes are formed, and a gamete contains only one unique character of each allelomorphic pair. Therefore, half of the gametes will have dominant factor and the remaining half will carry recessive factor. And this rule applies to both male and female gametes. You can see over here, a heterozygous plant or an offspring will produce half of dominant factors gametes and half of it will produce recessive factor gametes. Thus, the gametes formed from the F1 hybrids are always pure for a particular character, and one may carry either dominant or recessive factor, but not both. This is why law of segregation is also known as law of purity of gametes. Now let us learn about the third law, that is law of independent assortment. It stated that when the gametes are formed, the members of the different pairs of factors or genes segregate quite independently of each other, and that all possible combinations of the factors concerned will be found among the progeny. To better understand this law, we shall consider an example of a dihybrid cross. A cross was carried out between round and yellow seed with wrinkled and green seed. In F1 generation, all the offsprings produced round and yellow colored seeds. So it was immaterial which of the parents provided the pollen and which acted as a pistillate parent. It was also made no difference whether both dominant traits had originally been in one parent or each of the parents had contributed one of the dominant alleles. When the selfing was continued in F2 generation between a heterozygous gamete of one set of one parent and the heterozygous gametes of another parent, they are represented here in the horizontal row and vertical column. Mendel found that there were 9 round and yellow colored seeds. There were 3 round and green colored seeds. So also there were 3 wrinkled and yellow colored seeds and only 1 green and wrinkled colored seed, which was coming to ratio 9:3:3:1. Mendel saw that the ratio of 9:3:3:1 would be obtained if the two sets of traits inherit independently of each other, since two independent 3:1 ratio would be combined to simplify mathematical probability. These are my references. Thank you.